Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Yogacises podcast and YouTube channel. I have Sierra Melcher here, even though it's spelled Melcher withCher, but it's pronounced Melcher. She is a holistic, transformational mentor. She's a single mom. She's in the Columbia area. She has a great website. I just checked it out, and it looks like she works with candles, works with a variety of different things. So I'm really excited to have her here today. And let's thank you for being on. And if you could start with sharing your story and why you choose to be a transformational mentor, and how you get started with your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's really hard to say where the journey started, right? Because it's my life. Different parts of my life wove together, and there's a point where I did definitely shift gears. For almost 15 years, I was a high school teacher, and that was my thing. And I was all about learning and working with young people, and so I still use and integrate that earlier part of my life and training, because what I do now is, on some level, it's a different kind of learning. But it was actually, I left my teaching job, I got my yoga certification, I also became pregnant. And for anyone who's done any of those things, like, oh yeah, that's a big turning point in life where things can open up and the path that you were on can change. And so all of those things happened to me at the same time. And so I was living in Colombia already at the time, but I relocated to a new city. I was pregnant. I opened a yoga studio, and I had time and energy to access various parts of my life that as a teacher I hadn't really been attending to. And because they're subtle, right? Some of your previous guests have been medical experts or working with gut and well-being on that physical level. When you feel gross in your body, you know it. But sometimes when there's something off on the emotional level, we're actually so good at pretending we don't know it and occupying ourselves, being busy, trying something, a new fad, or going for a run, or whatever the thing is we do to distract ourselves from something's off. But I didn't have any of those distractions. And so I got into the subtlety of experience and began to study a lot myself. I got trained as a Reiki master. I got certified as a doula to help other women give birth at home, or at least give birth in a way that was supportive of them. And so I studied a bunch of varying things and started to put together this vision of the things aren't singular, right? If you're starting a business, people will say, well, what are you going to focus on? If you're going to study at school, they're saying, what are you going to focus on? And that's our specialization. Like, that's what we've done in education and in life for so long. And when I became a mentor, my coaches and my mentors were like, well, what are you going to focus on? And I said, well, if I only focus on one thing, I think I'm doing a disservice, because there is no one thing that is not connected to other things, right? I could be a relationship coach or a wellness coach or a whatever it is. Even a life coach is still relatively targeted. And it turns out that everything is connected. The body, the mind, our emotions, our spirit, other people, the environment, we are all connected. And so this holistic approach to things can bring anything, and it can go any direction. A lot of people really like give me the simple answer. And it's not, because everything's connected. But that means anyone can come and something's off, right? Like, maybe I'm not happy with my job, or I'm in this situation that isn't quite working. And then we go from there. I also think it's transformation because so holistic transformational mentor, because I think we're really overly excited about changing our lives. You know, if I just change this, then everything will be fine. And the change that happens for most of my clients, and certainly for myself, isn't a dramatic change in its, you know, oh, I figured this one thing out and then I read this one book and then my life was perfect. It's really subtle. And the subtle changes, the smallest changes, have massive impact over a long period of time. And it's not that we need to radically live our lives differently. It's really that we need to subtly live our lives differently. And so we focus on what I call micro shifts. What is the smallest thing that you can do today, really do today, to move towards something, or figuring out what it is that you're feeling, or towards something that you want. So that's a very long explanation, but that's my story in a nutshell.
Thanks for sharing that. So as you're basically trying to figure out yourself with the whole transformation changes and habits and the transformation with you for yourself and also for your clients, where do you start? Do you start with, for example, nutrition, or do you start with mental health, or do you start with specific activities? Or
That's another great question. Again, I think so much of our thinking has been trained to be linear, right? We're going to start here and we're going to go here. And I guarantee you this journey. And I am a holistic transformational mentor, like you said, because partially I needed to do this work myself, right? Got to be doing whatever it is. I came into it because I needed it. And once I found it, I was like, I'm not the only one who needs this. Look at that. To answer your question simply, I start with wherever my client is. I work almost exclusively with women, so I'm just going to say she. I start wherever she is. Something brought her to me, and we have a call, and I say, so why are you here? What do you need? And she can talk for a while. What's amazing, and maybe some other folks who offer similar services will identify with this, a client can speak, or anyone can speak, and say a whole lot of things, really answer the question, but not have noticed that they answered the question. They themselves don't really know why they're there in that sort of intellectual capacity. They know why they're there, and they need to sort of talk around things and have someone else say, here's what I heard you just say. Sounds like you are absolutely miserable in your job. And they're like, wow, yeah, I guess I am. I've never really thought about it that way. I sort of thought that I just had to stay in my job, or isn't everybody miserable in your job? You know, like there's just some underlying assumptions that when someone speaks, I serve both as a mentor, but I also serve as just like a listener and a mirror to be like, here's what you just said. Look, like literally, I'll repeat word for word what somebody says, and what do you see in this statement? And let them start to hear their own insights and their own wisdom. Because the underlying of everything is that I believe every woman has the answers. They are in here. They are in her psyche. They are in her body. We do a lot of like, okay, feel something, think something. Now feel your body. What's your body saying to you? Because so many of us are incredibly disconnected from our bodies. Even if we practice yoga, even if, we're sort of in the field, we're still intellectually connected with our bodies. We're not emotionally and spiritually connected with our bodies. And our bodies have millions of nerves and millions of ways that it's trying to communicate. And pain is the body trying to say, hi, think about this part. Don't forget about me. And you're like, okay. So we listen to the body. We use this vessel, this as a tool for insight. And a woman will say, oh, well, I really feel it here. I'm like, okay, well, this organ does this, or what does that tell you about yourself? I'm like, oh, well, maybe I need to rest, or, she has the insights in her, and the mentoring process is really teaching her to attune to her own wisdom and insight, listen to her own thoughts through guided meditation practices or mindfulness-based stress reduction practices, or just journaling, so that she can hear her own thoughts because they come out in written word. And she's like, oh my gosh, I've been thinking really negative things a whole lot of time. I want to get that thought and clear it out and see what comes up after that. Because each of us has that capacity within us. We are spiritual beings. We are absolutely powerful in terms of healing our own bodies with our thoughts. I mean, from the medical standpoint, it sounds incredible, but there's so much new research that we can change our DNA structure, that we can heal disease, that we can really dramatically shift this physical being. So of course, if we're having thoughts that we want to change, we can change them. If we don't like a situation that we've built in our life, we can build something else. We have this capacity, and it's messy sometimes. You're in a relationship that isn't suiting you. You can stay in that relationship and continue to feel all the things you feel, or you can change the relationship or leave the relationship, whether it's a friendship or a work relationship or a romantic relationship. There's almost no situation in life that we can't transform. And so teaching a woman how powerful she truly is, how insightful she is, and how capable she is what I do.
So you mentioned one of the things that people come to you for is not connecting with their bodies, and you were able to help them figuring out what they can do by talking to them and letting them figure things out themselves. Excuse me. So as for the whole changing the thought part, what if they're stuck? Like they can't figure out ways to change.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back. Most women don't come saying, I feel disconnected from my body, right? When we're disconnected from our bodies, we don't know we're disconnected from our bodies, right? We're just like living in a world that's up here and it's very intellectual or brainy and thoughts are running. And it's too busy to even know that we have this body other than when it fails us, right? That's when we're like, oh. But before that, how do I approach somebody who's stuck? This is great. There are so many little questions, and there are a bunch of tools and techniques. One of my favorite techniques for introducing someone to herself is a practice that I borrowed from Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way. It's an incredible book, The 12-Week Creative Process. And her very first tool, she calls Morning Pages. And it is 30 minutes of handwritten stream of consciousness. You can start, but it has to be done by hand, partially because of what happens between the hand and the brain. But also typing's it doesn't tap into our physiology the same way. So you're handwriting your thoughts. This is not a journal in its proper sense, where you're like, this is what I did today. It is literally, you are just transcribing your thoughts. You're like court reporter of the brain. And that means you're writing your grocery shopping list and all the things that you have to do and all of the clutter that is in your head. You are literally just getting it out, and you're thinking of that conversation you had the other day and how it could have gone differently and what you should have said and how that person should have reacted and blah, 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 blah. And when I introduce this exercise to people, I explain it sort of like the digestive system. When we put something in our mouths, it goes through our bodies, we take nutrients from it, and whatever's not serving us, we poop out. Okay? And if you're not pooping daily, you start to feel like crap. The brain is ingesting so much stuff, ideas, thoughts, text messages, especially in the 21st century. We are just bombarded with stuff. And we have less and less time to digest in our brain information, thoughts, ideas, obligations, blah, 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 blah. It's really cluttered in there. And it just starts to swirl around. We have the same thoughts over and over and over again. And whether it creates stress or anxiety or depression, or is just negative and sort of cruel to ourselves, it's just this cesspool of stuff. And the morning pages is the best way that I've ever found for digesting and pooping out those thoughts that have no other way of getting out of the cycle. And because you can write it down, it's not a journal that's beautiful. You don't write with a nice pen. It can be on a napkin and you can throw it away, because it's not about the product. It's about the process of cleansing the mind. And it's in this process, going back to if somebody's stuck. After Julia Cameron says, I think 30 or 90 days of this, it's a lot of morning pages. But it's because most of us are really mentally and emotionally constipated. And so the idea is to get to declutter and get rid of this stuff. You can burn the pages. You can literally flush them down the toilet if that metaphor really works for you. Nobody reads them. You never read them again. But almost every person that I've ever worked with, and Julia Cameron says the same thing, that after about page 2, it stops being about the rigmarole of the day and your obligations, and you get into this sort of interior insight space. And so I usually get about half a page of absolute brilliant insight. And then the last couple of lines, I'm like, wow, 3 pages is way too long. How like, I can't believe I have to write 5 more lines. This is ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. But there's a glimpse of something in there. So it's a decluttering process. And then because there's some space, your body and your mind is like, here you go. Or you've written something and it's cruel to you, right? It's mean and it's just shit talking to yourself. And you're like, ooh, I don't really like that thought. Like, let's get that out of the way. So I can't recommend enough morning pages. If somebody's stuck in anything, it takes about 30 minutes to hand write 3 pages. And if you get a notebook that's this big, it's not going to work. You really need sort of like a real size piece of paper. But that is the first access point to yourself, is literally writing down every thought and not censoring it, right? We're like, ooh, I'm not going to write that thought. That thought's not good enough to get on paper. Every single thought, even the thoughts about how stupid morning pages is and how disappointed you took my advice from this podcast and you're doing it and you can like rage against me. Like, this is dumb. I can't believe Sierra told me to do this. I'm never going to do this again. All of it, get it out. Like, just because that's when we're stuck, things aren't flowing. Let them flow and see what happens, because there is insight right below the surface in every single one of us waiting to come out.
That is a great tip. And this is one book you mentioned, and your site, I'll share the link below in the description as well. I see in your blog page, you have a lot of book reviews, and so you read a lot. That's awesome.
I do read a lot, and I'm trying to write a lot because what I'm getting from all of these books, each book adds a little bit of something to my own practice and what I can offer others. Each year I write a reading list of everything that I've read, and I've tried to annotate them to give a little description, or I highly recommend this one, or here's the insight I got. So I'm finishing up 2019's list right now. And it's just really interesting, because while we're surrounded by so much information, sometimes it's hard to be curious, because we're just exhausted. We've taken in too much information without intending to, and like eating without meaning to. And you're like, I'm full, so I'm not going to eat that salad or that, that really nutritious home-cooked meal because I've been snacking on chips all day long. The same thing happens, I find, with my phone. I only got a smartphone a couple of years ago, and I was really resistant to it because I didn't want to be like force-feeding my brain. I wanted to be intentional about what I chose to consume. And so I really like books because I say like that subject, that author, that medium, I want it.
Mm.
And it feels like I'm feeding myself intentionally.
So your preference is physical book or audio or ebooks?
I was a history teacher for years, and I was, raised by hippies and born in a cabin. And so for a long time, I was just a total old school stickler. It's like, I want the physical book. There's something about it for me that activates generations of memory or something. I live in South America now, and there are not a lot of English speaking books, like English language bookstores here. I'm not going to spend tons of money trying to have things shipped. I got a book 8 months after I ordered it on Amazon once. So the practicality of living here has taught me to expand and be flexible. I have a Kindle, which I love because you can highlight and take notes and then email all the notes from a book to yourself and just have the best parts. But I also love Audible. A couple of years ago, I got an Audible subscription because I can read a book while I'm walking and doing the dishes and making dinner. And so that allows for me to increase my consumption. And there's times where I'm like, no, actually, I just need to walk. Right now, I need to walk and not be listening to anything and not adding to my digestion. But there are other times where I'm doing something and I'm like, I'm curious right now. There is something really powerful about just washing the dishes. Like you will get some insight or ping when you let yourself not do a million things. But I love Audible. And I was just introduced to Blinkist, which is like a daily, you can have the free app or a subscription, and it gives you a very short summary of a bunch of books.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a way of introducing you to new content. I haven't decided how I feel about it yet, but it's interesting. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Because
I'm open to everything.
Speaking of that, Blinkist, I actually applied to be an affiliate, and
okay.
it took them like 2 months just to get back to me because it's high demand.
No. Yeah. So it's an interesting idea, but I love, at this point, I'm pretty much open to what's the easiest way I can get something. And certain books I'll choose. I really want the Kindle version. I want to be able to read it because I want word for word to get to write down what they're saying. And books by Brene Brown, I actually get both. I want to hear her talk to me, but then I really need either a digital or physical version because there's so many things that I want to take notes about. It really just depends what the content is.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I have more questions about your mentoring, how
Sure,
that
let's
works.
do it.
So what are your general, like the length of your sessions per session, and then the time frame, how long you work with the clients?
Yep. The first introductory package is recommended 6 sessions. The first one's a little bit longer than an hour. And most clients will do a discovery call even before that to make sure that we're a good fit. So we do a discovery call for about 20 minutes. And then if they choose to work with me, they get 6 sessions. The first one's about 90 minutes. The last one's also about 90 minutes, and everyone in between is an hour. And I recommend, although it's very flexible, I recommend every 10 days or so. When I originally started, I said, every week or every 2 weeks, whatever works for the client. Every week ends up being a little too close together. Each session has so much in it, and there are, takeaway tasks and things for the client to practice, that a week it's not enough time to really integrate whatever we've talked about in the last session. And 2 weeks is just a little bit too much time. So I found sort of the sweet spot about every 10 days. It's enough time to feel through and process and try something and come back ready for more. So 10 days, it's still flexible, but that's my highest recommendation. And that's one-on-one. It's in person if you happen to live in South America in my city. But most English speaking clients live elsewhere. And so we meet like this on Zoom. And yeah, it's amazing what can happen. It sounds like 6 or 7 hours couldn't be enough to transform something. But like we just talked about, the simple idea of the morning pages, if somebody can put that into practice and do 10 days of morning pages, and then we come back, what did you get? Where are you struggling? What are the insights? What's this? What's that? There's so much that can be learned from some of the simple, what seem to be really simple practices. And of course, I only work with a few people at a time, so that I can be available via email if somebody has a question, or I'm very flexible and available that way. So there's support throughout the time. It's not, that was your hour, I'll talk to you in 10 days.
So what are some of your routines that you do to keep your energy up and be able to prevent like any, I don't know, not great energy coming to you?
The official term of not great energy. That's a good question. And I want to make sure that I say, because I do this work, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect, right? I said earlier that we sort of think of things as a line. We start here and we're supposed to end up here, right? And it's really not. I feel like we all are sort of cycling around, and sometimes we're doing things really well and we've got it all together and everything's smooth. And sometimes we get off track and it falls apart. And that is as useful actually to me as anything else. It's like, oh, when I'm starting not to feel well, then it's like, okay, what is off, right? And it's just a matter of paying attention. In order to pay attention, I find I need a certain amount of time to myself. I need rest. I need to eat well, which requires having a certain amount of time to get the food and prepare the food that makes me feel good. Because I'm an entrepreneur and a single mom, I don't have alone time. I don't have self time. So one of the things that I do is I actually just claim a day randomly about every 10 days, and I call it Sunday. It might be a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and my daughter's gone off to school for a couple of hours, and I just say, today's Sunday. And I do whatever I want to do in that particular moment. I don't plan it. I just, sometimes it's Netflix, sometimes I read a book, sometimes I take a nap. It happens, whatever it is. Because today's Sunday, and I'm right here, and then when we get off this call, I play with my daughter all day long, and it's not downtime, right? Like I love it. It's refreshing, but it's not restful in the way that before I had a child, a Sunday could actually just like be nothing. So I claim random Sundays. You can call them mental health days. You can call them whatever you want, but I call them Sundays. And when I first started the business, there's infinite number of things to do. And so anyone who's working for themselves, has accounts to do and marketing to do and planning for the future and course development and blah, blah. Like it's never ending. And I got overwhelmed by that. And so I made a rule, a guideline for myself, and I call it the rule of 3, which means in any particular day, I do not schedule more than 3 things. So, and that actually includes clients. This is why I won't see 6 people in a day or even 4. I have one client meeting. Maybe I'll have a coffee with someone. Maybe I will have another meeting, but that's the whole day. Because I still have to parent and cook and do the million of other things. It doesn't sound like very many things, but when I do more than 3 things, I'm running around, I'm not present in the thing that I'm doing. And for me, I found that 3 things is it. That's all I can do. So that's where I've left it.
I like that idea because I just go work and work and work and work nonstop. So it's good that you have that little break, self-care, mental health time, so that you can be present when, like you said, when you're working with your clients and things like that.
Because we all get overwhelmed, right? And even parenting, not even, especially with parenting, if we are tired, if we are past our limit, I don't do a very good job being a parent when I've done too many things during the day. It's like the double shift, that expression, like you work all day and then as soon as your kids get home, you work again. Like I have another 8-hour shift with her. And if I am tired, we're both not nice to each other. And that like just is not how I want to be. So anytime that happens, and it still does from time to time, I'm like, okay, what have I like taken on too much, or where have I pushed my limits and not been responsible with what did you call it? The not too good energy. It's like just taking on too much, feeling like there's, because to pull back actually is an act of faith. Mm-hmm. It's trust, right? Like, I don't have to make it happen. What I can do is actually relax. I can rest. And the most amazing things happen when I stop trying. It's like the universe is ready when I get out of my way. I'm trying to get everything done. And the universe, as soon as I pull back, is like, here you go. But if I'm busy, I'll miss it, or I just won't have had time for the gift. And I had one yesterday. I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was sitting next to a woman who was the exact woman that I needed to talk to about a project that I'm building. And we sat next to each other for 2.5 hours. We didn't engage. And then she asked me to make sure she'd written something in English correctly. And I said, yep, that looks great. It actually is super fascinating. It was about gender and it was about human rights. And I was like, what are you working on? And she said, oh, well, I'm the lead professor at this local university doing all of this stuff about migration and gender and human rights. And I said, okay, we need to talk. And we had an hour conversation. We're following up with a meeting on Monday, but I would never have met her and all of her colleagues if I hadn't been sitting in a coffee shop.
That's so true.
So I think so many of us feel like we have to make it happen. And the most amazing things happen when I stop trying so hard.
It's almost like unblocking your energy, letting it through.
Yeah. And it's a challenging one. There's so many emotions tangled up in that of like, I've got to get it done. Yeah, good, get it done. But get out of your own way, because the more magical things will happen when you allow space. So.
That is so true. All right. Any additional tips? Oh yeah. Before let me go back. So with your clients, you said you've done yoga, Reiki, and then all these things, and you let your clients figure out what they need to do. Do you also recommend yoga or Reiki, or you help them with that as well, in addition to the other recommendations?
I integrate what I've learned from Reiki and yoga and breathing practices. I integrate it into our conversations. I don't often prescribe someone to do something necessarily, but I can say, a lot of the women who come to me actually already have so many of these practices. They're doing physical movement. They're doing some sort of energetic or spiritual work. It's not my job in that way to prescribe something beyond try morning pages, or like start a dialogue with yourself, or give yourself a down day. And I don't very usually, I won't do distance Reiki usually with my clients, although I've done it in the past. If someone has some pain in their body, I can always just say, like, try this stretch, and that'll help, relieve the pain in your lower back. That's, I'm not going to cut that information from what I know. I learn things, and that's the holistic approach, but I'm not going to be someone's yoga teacher. I might do a guided meditation at the end of something and have it recorded, and they can listen to it whenever. But before we end, I do want to add the other thing that I do is group work. I came to start working with sisterhoods and women's circles a number of years ago. I have one that meets in town weekly, but I also offer online groups, small groups, intimate groups of 6 to 10 women that also meet weekly for a series of 6 weeks at a time. And we do a variety of things. It's never focused on one particular woman, and we don't have a curriculum per se, because that assumes that I have a formula. And what I've discovered is that when you bring women together what we all really need, honestly, is an hour to check in with ourselves. And so that's what the women's circle is about. It's a space where we can each reconnect. We can reconnect with ourselves, start listening to our bodies, listening to that inner voice, but also reconnecting in the presence of others shows us that we're not alone, that we're not crazy, that everyone around us is having very similar experiences. And then we can learn together and say, well, how do you approach this? And how do you approach that? Because again, every woman has the answers she needs, but we're not providing ourselves with the space to discover our own answers. And so Women's Circle is a space where together we can discover our own answers and sometimes borrow someone else's answer. And they're like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to try that. Mm-hmm. When I started Circle, I felt like I had to be the expert, and I felt like I had to know everything and have all the answers come through me. And what I've discovered is that the most powerful women's circles are when I can help create a space and create a container, a context for these women to check in with themselves and to know one another, and then let them share their experiences and their wisdom and their insights and get out of the way. Again, I can share my own, but only as a woman in circle, not as the leader or the expert, because we all have it. And so those are really powerful spaces. And they're convenient because you can check in from wherever you are.
Is this a free thing or is it a paid?
It's you sign up for 6 weeks. It's paid. It's $197 for the 6 weeks. And it comes with all of the same recommendations and tools that I would share with my one-on-one clients. So we'll practice the morning pages. A couple of times in the past, I've bought a book for each of the women in the group. And so we will dip into the book from time to time and read certain things. The ones that I'm planning for January and February, I don't think will be based on a book, but we'll see how that goes. So those are, and I wanted to actually offer to anyone who's watching this podcast a 20% discount on that $197. So if you'll figure out how to tell them that, right? If you've watched this podcast, then we can put a link to how to join a virtual circle.
That link.
They're really, really excellent groups. I'll send you a link.
Yeah, if anybody's watching, just mention Yogacises and you get 20% off. Even the other offers too, like your private, your one-on-one, and then your group sessions as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's great. And if you could just, I'll list all your links in the description, but if you could also mention it here so people can just hear it as well.
My website has a lot of information. It's integral-women.com, integral-women.com. I'm on Facebook under Integral Women Mentoring. I'm on Instagram under the same thing. Twitter, Women Integral. On LinkedIn under Sierra Melchar. I'd love to connect with anyone and everyone as much as possible. If you have questions for me, know that because I haven't scheduled my day too busy, I have time for a quick email or a call. Anyone can schedule a discovery call with me, which is just a 20-minute conversation where you get to figure out what you're working on and how we might be able to work together. And those are free, of course, just to get to know one another. So let me know.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's been great.